So at times of natural disasters or significant community events, early childhood educators play a really critical role in establishing a sense of security for children and families and communities. But in saying that, it's really important that you look after yourself first. So we know children really pick up on the anxieties of adults, so it's important that you take care of your own well-being. And I think as early childhood educators, we often park our own needs and preference for children. But in this instance, we know that we don't actually cope with stressful events very effectively if we're not doing well ourselves. So look for support, understand your limits, and understand your own supports at this time. It's also about looking after your staff and finding time to talk about your own feelings, and also know when it is time to bring in specialised help.
As early childhood educators, one of the advantages that we have is that we actually get to work in a team context. So some people work in small teams, some people work in large teams, but generally we have a support structure around us. And that's something in all times, and particularly in times of crisis, that we can really use to support each other and to bounce ideas off each other and to engage in some critical reflection. So really acknowledging the importance of your team and nurturing that team is a really important part of your practice.
One of the considerations that we need to think about it within any workplace is that there's our personal lives and there's our professional lives. And of course, if there are things impacting our personal life, it will tend to come into our professional life as well. In the case of if there's been some natural disaster, then I think there's a little bit more space within the workplace, within the professional life, to at least talk a little about some of what's happening on a personal level. But for each person, they'll have their own amount that they want to talk. Some people may want to use work as a respite from all of that's happening. Other people may need to process a lot of what's happening, and they may want to talk a lot about it. And so as a worker, then you're just trying to help other people to make good decisions, helpful decisions, so that you're not inadvertently distressing other people through retelling your own traumas at work. And in cases where we were concerned for somebody who did seem to be talking a lot about their own traumas, we may need to just have a quiet word and find them some other help.
We've always had a close team. In the time that Kirsty's here, she's really pulled the team together and led the team. And so through the bushfires, even though she also was evacuated, it was still that leadership role that she had to make sure that she looked after the staff and checked in on who was where and what, those sorts of things. So definitely you need to have that personal relationship, I think, within your team, and then for us as a community preschool into the management level, just to make sure that you have a good work environment in a nice normal time, let alone in an emergency time.
I think, strangely enough, I think coming back to preschool gave us a lovely focus, that it wasn't about the trauma or the stress of what had been happening in the week before. But we were really conscious that we were professionals in this environment, and so it wasn't a time for us to share our stories with our families, but a time to be empathetic and listen to them and be supportive to the children. I think we spoke about that a lot, didn't we?
We did, and it's really important to compartmentalise but also be aware of the fact that our lives do cross over. We live in a really small community, so we have our educators who are also our friends, who are also the friends of our children at other schools and things. So while at preschool in their jobs, the educators worked very much as educators, but then outside of work in their reflective time, then they got the opportunity to support each other and share their personal experiences. And the same with the parents of preschoolers and the management committee. There were times when the educators would be very focused on their role and not share at all their experiences, and then other times in a different setting when they would share it. So you can't just switch it off, but in order to do the job and provide that safe and secure environment, and also be a bit of a sounding board for the parent bringing in the preschooler who might be worried or whatever, and the parent who's also just had this huge thing happen to them, I think there were parents probably who were anxious and feeling that separation anxiety as well, weren't there? Because there had been families who had evacuated separately, so families who'd sent their children with relatives and they'd stayed behind to fight the fires. So there was that two-way separation anxiety.
Yes.